Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lamont Weber, and today um, we have an extraordinary happening. Um, I'm I'm with Dr. Richard Allen Miller, who is a cosmic polymath, and if I urge you to go, I mean, because this is evidence of a cosmic polymath, and go to richardallenmiller.com right now while you're watching this. I've never said this before. Go to the website, because you really have to witness this. It's extraordinary. It is all there, and there's something that jumps out, because Dr. Richard Allen Miller and I are going to meet, because he's coming up and actually crossing the 49th parallel, which he's crossed many times before, and coming through Vancouver, British Columbia, and his way to Victoria, where he is going to do something that he will describe, but is extraordinary. However, he is also coming through Vancouver, BC, and this ties into one paragraph that I'm going to ask him to open on, which I haven't heard yet, but I'm going to ask him this, and I'll say why I'm asking it, and then I'll ask him the question. Quote, Dr. Miller was the real-life character that the X-Files' Fox Mulder was based on, investigating unexplained phenomena for Navy SEAL Corps and MRU, which put him in the path of many incredible life experiences, including an encounter with an alien and travel to an underground Arctic Nazi base. Well, we all know that the courthouse in the X-Files is the Vancouver, BC Art Museum, Old Public Library, and that's the courthouse. So maybe we can make a visit down there, and you can do a courtesy imitation of Fox Mulder.
I mean, where they crucify me on stage. Yeah. We did a lot of shoots up there in Vancouver, as you know. When Carter took it over, I didn't really want to move to Hollywood, and they couldn't offer me enough money, and that's the deal. And so I stepped back and was their advisor on set. And that's what I would do. If they wanted to know what forensics might look like, I would say, well, Dr. Carl Motte's lab looked like this, you know. He was dean of forensics down at the University of Washington. I worked in the School of Medicine at the University of Washington in anesthesiology at the time. And Dr. Jerry Pollack was my lead back in 1970. So, you know, I've known all these characters for a very long time. It's interesting what's happening now in our society and where people are starting to go regarding disinformation and what's going on in the news and what's real. I don't have all the answers. You know, it's a process, but there's something about to happen on Earth. And according to the Aborigines, whom I find are more credible than the Inuit or the Hopi, state that the end of days is right now. They had a big conference over in Brisbane this last month, and those archives are available. And they came in from Adelaide. Matt Stein and I do urban survival skill workshops, and that'll be one of the things I'm doing with Unity Churches up on Vancouver Island, is speaking about sustainable lifeboats and the development of getting ready for what is about to be, quote, the big one that FEMA and others talk about. The Hopi have talked about it as a red and blue cucina, which is reminiscent of a redshift, something going through our solar system so quickly. I have an Eastern Intelligence friend that just sent me some, we're going to have another couple of near misses here in the next day or so, with you know, comets going through our solar system. There is a lot of debris going through right now. The Earth is, because the sun is in a solar minimum right now, It goes through a trail of debris and through what they call the dragon tails, ionized streamers out in deep space. And it's no longer absorbing those because of its solar minimum. And so these items are falling around the sun and hitting Earth. And that's why we have the strange weather. The Earth is expanding slightly. It's about 0.6 times larger because of the absorption of these materials and causing the cracking and the earthquakes that we're all enjoying. Mauna Loa and Kilauea are going to take out the big island of Hawaii probably sometime this next year. And when that does happen, there will be a shift along the coastline. And everything along I-5 is going to be in jeopardy. Just FYI, that's military. You can see your own maps. If you do a Google called Future Map of America, Chet Snow. That's the one the military uses, the Navy maps. There's others, Scallion, others that do that, but the primary one is the one that Chet Snow. That's the one, worst case scenario, that we think is probably going to happen. It will most likely be an 8.4 off of Crescent City as a volcano underwater. And the big island of Hawaii will go up in 3 pieces and then fall back down and never be seen again. It's already forming new islands as we speak, just like they predicted. There's some professor or two over in Hilo that are getting ready because it's no longer safe there. It's like the air here in Washington and Oregon. The forest fires that we've had have literally made our atmosphere unbreathable. And so one of the things I do is I speak about vertical aquaculture underground and how to, because there'll probably be a period where you won't be able to grow a lot of your food up on top of the surface. The sun will be either hidden or in smoke of some kind because of forest fires and or debris from volcanoes going off. I think Edgar Cayce and others have talked about that in their predictions about New Jerusalem, and there's the volcano of Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, and Mount Olympus going all off. So I don't know how that's all going to play. None of us really know what's going to happen, but as military, we prep. So that's what I do, and I'll be speaking about some of that and what to do in the event of grid down.
Well, that's really extraordinary because my first book was really The Age of Cataclysm, which was based on the Edgar Cayce prophecies and kind of integrating them with what we knew back in 1973 with modern earth sciences.
Right.
And I wouldn't say Edgar Cayce prophecies, he sort of remote viewed. I'm not sure that it's always a question of time because he saw the axis shift in 2001.
Yep.
And
well, the axis has shifted. Actually, the Inuit will say that the stars are different now. They and that's something that they are saying. The axis has shifted, and your meridian around the center of the Earth, the equator, has now shifted to a slightly different. You are watching the magnetic poles. There's different ones. Dr. Bert Bolin, University of Stockholm, Sweden, Nobel Prize winner in geoastrophysics, talks about this, and you might find that useful information. It's hard to say because our references to things are different, and because the Earth is expanded, tsunamis are going to be different. They won't be like the flood. A tsunami today might be as high as 40 feet. It'll never get to 100, probably. That's probably accurate. Look what 3 feet did to Fukushima. And today, that's another serious problem, is that all the nuclear reactors should be turned off. Every single one of the Daiichi Lake GE reactors are all leaking now. Indian Point, up on the Hudson, down in Florida. The New Madrid fault line has 21 leaking reactors as we speak. If we have an event without those being turned off, what will essentially happen is that there will be places on the earth that are no longer fit for man. There'll be forbidden zones, where you can't travel. That's a worst case scenario. I'm concerned. That we've turned
Right.
most of them off here, but that the one in Washington is leaking in the Columbia River, and so a lot of the salmon and or halibut that they're pulling out of Chicago, out of San Francisco, is not from Fukushima. It's probably from the Columbia River. Hanford's leaking. Everything there is leaking. I'm not saying that the fish glow, but it's coming close. And now you have your Fraser and up there on your part. And now I'm going to suggest that the best way to buy seafood is with a Geiger counter. Just kidding.
Wow. Yeah. Well, tell me, people are talking about, they use words like Planet X, Nibiru, or brown dwarf. Are those terms that enter into your analysis at all on this?
Well, I've written about cavitation processes and the true nature of time travel. Cavitation is a model or a way of looking at the world. That's why you have two brains. You're like an hourglass with science and religion, and what you have is that in-between point, the moment, like an hourglass does. And so everything's a reflection of something else, like a drop of water hitting a pool of water. And so, of course, the soul would have, most all suns are binary, and there's a reflection. And Nibiru is out past the Oort cloud, and Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Stanford, they're all, there it is. I had one friend, I'm going to do a metaphor on you now. One friend at JPL said the IR signature on Nibiru was wrong. And another friend said, yeah, maybe it's a Dyson sphere around the Nibiru. And then I said, yeah, it's our future coming in to collect the rent at the moment, because we didn't start here on Earth. And we're just on borrowed time here on Earth as a secondary place that man started. There are two objects out near Saturn right now that are, I don't know if it's wormwood and the other, but they are planets from Nibiru that have entered into our solar system right now, and is also part of what is causing weather events and other kinds of crazy things that we're not sure what they all mean. Global warming, global cooling. The correct answer, yes. Who knows what's going on? We're going to have a day after tomorrow because of the saline solutions in the ocean, because all the currents are gone now. Europe used to have 7 currents, and it was down to 4, and now they have 0 currents in terms of air. And if you watch the forest fires using tomography like we have in our bunkers here, you can see that some of the forest fires appear to be started from lava being exposed from the recent earthquakes that we've had in, the different things. I think Yellowstone is going to go. When it goes, that will herald the change in the events. And the way the Aborigines have put it, it will all occur before 2020, and then by 2023, those of us that remain will look back and wonder how we survived this. There will be a lot of people surviving it. That it's just going to be a challenge. And one of the things I'll talk to you about in our talks up in Vancouver will be about water and the importance of having drinkable water. The way Matt puts it in our survival things, he'll say you have 3 minutes for air, 3 days for water, and 3 weeks for food. What's important?
Now, does the word ascension ever come into your vocabulary at all? And that is a density shift. That is shifting from 3rd density into 5th density as a strategy.
It's a metaphor. the next level of evolution in man's consciousness will be where magic becomes an advanced form of physics and the study of altered states of consciousness as tools in a toolbox. In certain, what I'm doing now is I'm mapping those. 45 years ago, when I trained Navy SEALs, I used biofeedback to learn how to listen to sounds in your body, controlling autonomic functions, heart rate, pulse, respiration. Today, 45 years later, I'm doing the same thing with neurotransmitters. The chill, that goes up and down your body, that's dimethyltryptamine being released. You can actually use that to regenerate nerve tissue, a study that Robert O. Becker and I did in anesthesiology in Clinic 7. And there are other uses where when you can manipulate these various neurotransmitters, what you essentially can do is literally change the movie. The brain, 45 years ago, I stated that the DNA was a three-dimensional hologram of force space. The structure of the DNA was a hologram of force space of who you were, who you are, and who you will be. The brain is a four-dimensional hologram of five space. And while a lot of saints in history have stressed the importance of meditation, training the mind, that's bliss states with Persinger and others up in Ottawa. And really, there are other places in the brain called like the reticular activating of the RAS and the Wernicke correction. Now, the Wernicke correction, there's a whole group of studies that have shown that if you take a person down into hypnosis cross-culturally, that's Chinese, Korean, whatever, all have the same memory of having worked on Mars for the US government. How does that work? It's called the Mars Project and the Wernicke correction. Now, that's a study that is dealing on concepts of archetype, you know, where we have archetypal encounters. Are alien abductions real? I don't know. I do know that everybody is experiencing a very similar phenomena, and that is metaphored into consciousness as an alien abduction. We have others now showing similar things like gang stalking. Another one is called targeted individuals. All of these are group mind, hive conscious, archetypal level of encounters that are randomly occurring. And is it literal? Like ascension, is that literal? I'm certain that there is a metaphor or aspect or element in the physical world. Absolutely. Like missing time, you know, something else is going on here. But we may not yet have the vocabulary in the sciences to accurately describe it with a cause. John Mack was a friend of mine when I taught metaphysics at Harvard. I taught a graduate level metaphysics for 11 years. And he took my third course, I think it was in 1992. And that's when he started his alien abduction studies at Harvard. And I was present in the Bramwell case over in Homestead, Florida, working with him on that. And what I discovered is that there's something else going on than a physical alien coming down and grabbing a physical human being and putting them on a physical spacecraft. That may or not be true. What is true is that they all have encountered some kind of trauma. And that is what Mack was ordered to try to address, is the trauma and helping them with the trauma of what happened, whether it was real, imagined, archetypal, or something. At some point, there's going to be a breakthrough in these areas, including your ascension. The three books I'm writing right now, the ESP book, which is, you know, the course I'm going to be doing for Navy SEALs up on Victoria in Nanaimo, that was book one of Power Tools, which was number 2. And the third book I'm writing right now, a manuscript, is The Non-Local Mind in a Holographic Universe. And basically how to change the movie by learning how to listen to and manipulate certain neurotransmitters like we did with heart rate, pulse, and respiration 45 years earlier. Now, for me, as a physicist, that would be what I would presume to be ascension. It's the next step, and it will allow man to, basically, the theorem is imagination is reality. How did Merlin put it? Anything not specifically forbidden is mandatory. If it's possible, you can count on it. And so all things are real.
Now, if those who are first encountering your work, what would be the first of your books to read?
Depending on where you're coming from. If you're a farmer, like most of BC is up in the Punjabi, up there doing up that, farming. Potential of herbs as a cash crop, native plants. I have a 9-volume encyclopedia on alternative agriculture. And all of that was helped and directed because of Conrad Richter and Richters of Canada out of Toronto, actually Goodwood. I'm an agriculturalist. I'm your so-called MacGyver for the military. The woods guy that goes out and knows how to eat the wood and, make a living in the woods, live off the woods. If your wife was interested, if it wasn't for psychism, then she might want to do The Modern Alchemist. That's a graduate level text that's used in McGill and other universities on the East Coast as a graduate level text in Jungian psychotherapy. My books, The Power Tools for the 21st Century, is what everybody's enjoying because it gives you power tools. A power tool, one of the power tools, chapter 1 is on cordyceps. It's a pharmaceutical mushroom that we did studies in feedlots up in Nanaimo and Skagway, feeding in growth ponds for the salmon and eliminating the antibiotics. And we used, when you take transfer factor and you mix it with these polysaccharides, you create a antibiotic substitute that does not have any problem getting into the food chain. It's not going to be toxic like antibiotics might. So very discriminate, because basically what polysaccharides are about are big, long sugar molecules that are delivering oxygen to the body on a cellular level. Your body can't get enough oxygen. Cancer is eliminated as a byproduct, just can't exist. And so the body is always making mistakes. So cancer is a given. What you don't want it to do is masticize. A power tool would be where you take one thing and you add a second thing, and now what you have is a superfood. You have blue-green algae off of Klamath Lake. Has neuropeptides in it, not polypeptides, but neuropeptides. That's why if it's freeze-dried, will go across the blood-brain barrier, and now your brain is able to make true nerve tissue again, rather than glial cell, which is what you do now. That means you can reverse certain forms of aging just with nerve tissue regeneration. And that was a study that Robert O. Becker and I did. So where do you begin with my work? Well, I don't know. What are your interests? I write in a lot of areas. I'm trying to leave footprints, not so much about me, but like Tai Chi. One does not learn Tai Chi. One studies it. That means, like my writings, you take my insights and integrate them as a study into your own and make my ideas your ideas and go beyond my ideas with it. And that is the difference between studying something and learning something. It's where you take something of mine and make it yours, and somehow uniquely yours. And that's where my blessings are, is that I look at things that way. I'm no big deal. Nobody's ever original, because even in the Nobel Prize, it's always shared with a couple of different people from different parts of the world. It's archetypal. And what I am is like a lead scout, on the length, girth, and width of possibilities with man. And I'm doing it from the science's point of view, as the physicist that didn't blow himself up. Well, you know, Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. Yeah.
Right. Now, for example, if you encountered a person who was a targeted individual and is getting what they call V2K, voice to skull, and is having all of these type of experiences, and has been scanned, and that is where they can show that there are implants in the brain that have been placed there covertly placed during unrelated hospital surgeries.
You don't need implants for that. That was a technology that Alan Frey developed at Willow Grove, and then we developed at the University of Washington. That's being able to place the sound anywhere in space, including outer space. It is another way of communication. And basically, what you're at is 0.3 to 3 gigahertz microwave band. And what you do is heterodyne then audio on top of that, and you can hear it in your head without ever having to go through the process of your eardrum. That is got double edges to the sword, just like nuclear energy does. You got an atom bomb or you got nuclear medicine. So, you know, everything, okay. These two, voice to skull, synthetic telepathy, is in itself not a weapon, but what they did, I'll give you a story. It started with our prisons where they were beta testing antipsychotics over opiates. And as a result, today, our prisons are having an epidemic in antipsychotics, Zoloft, all the different weird Prozac, etc. Over opiates. Opiates are no longer the problem in prisons. It's now antipsychotics. The second beta testing was giving it to our children. And what they did, they would give 10 children Prozac. 2 of them would be psychically unstable. And if you'll remember, in all the high school shootings, there's always a second shooter where the primary that's left with scapegoat is hearing voices in his head. And basically the second shooter is a handler that hits him with scopolamine. And the first reports at any kind of a high school shooting will always depict, shootings over here and over there at the same time. That is another beta test on the new 5G towers that they're putting in with smart meters as an end game weapon. Now, if they put a smart meter on your home, they now can have an AI using DNA from your garbage to target someone specifically in your home, doing the same kind of thing where they don't no longer need law enforcement. They'll just have somebody in the neighborhood do it. And even if you opted out on a smart meter, that doesn't mean your neighbor is. And how many people in your neighborhood are right now on Zoloft or Prozac? It's an epidemic. And this is one of the reasons why I would say, first and foremost, you don't even want 5G towers. The 5G tower is to deliver the voice. Once you have the voice, the kid hears the voices in his head, and then he's slightly unstable on the drugs he's on. You have a handler hit him with scopolamine, and you've now got a Batman movie down, in Arizona or wherever. The other part of the problem is isolating variables, because whenever there's any event that happens, like Las Vegas, then you have plausible deniability where there's an opportunity, and let's test out our thing too. Well, get a helicopter and we'll shoot a couple of other people and see what happens next on gun control. It's a terrible, terrible situation where you don't really know if Sandy Hook actually happened. Sandy Hook was closed 2 months before they even had that event. And so then you have the parents coming up and complaining regarding what's his face that just got kicked off of Facebook, Alex Jones. And really, I've got videos showing same individual going in and out of the school as a part of the acting thing. And 2 of them were professional actors that are still alive down in Florida, and I've got videos on that. So what's real? I don't know. What I do know is there's a high likelihood we're never going to know. Just like when I went to Antarctica. When I was in Antarctica, I was not lead physicist. What I was working for an anthropologist. She brought a team together, had me come in because I was the physicist in charge of light. I had to figure out how the bioluminescence worked in the cavern. And when I was there, I saw 19 sub-slips right there that were abandoned, beat up, and all that. Further down, there was a 14th century Viking base. Where's that in our history books? And then further down still was this hole. Now, it went 100 miles straight down into the metal. We did not in the 70s have the technology to be able to go down that hole. I think when Buzz Aldrin and some of the others did go to Antarctica this last 2 years, I think they figured a way to get down that hole, and probably what they discovered was something like, I don't know, the film in stasis. And then when the evacuation occurred, probably one of them woke up. Who knows? You know, we're probably never going to know because of all the conspiracy and all the fake news that CNN or whatever might want to do to put spin on political movement. I don't know. I'm a nerd. I can candidly say that I have witnessed things. So when one would ask me, are aliens real? My response would be, how could they not be? You know, imagination is reality. Probably anything you could possibly imagine is true, and even more. And so plausible deniability, like the forest fires, there's probably half a dozen things. You know, the chemtrails that they're spraying all over everywhere is barium oxide. You put that barium oxide on the ground and you have a forest fire go across that, it's going to explode. And that's what would account for these weird fires that everybody's encountering in Northern California now. Energy beams? Yeah, that would be a good place to test a new weapon. They have weapons now that you can't even imagine. On TED Talks, they have these little, I don't know, what are they, drones, little tiny fly on the walls camera, and they put a little explosive charge in that, and they deploy 10,000 of them over British Columbia with an AI directing, you know, a 3rd generation D-Wave out of Abbotsford, directing traffic, you know, and how are you going to avoid that? Well, that one is done with a scrambler. You can have a scrambler that can scramble the drone so it can't recognize you. But once they put a smart meter on your house, that probably will be the beginning of the end of any kind of freedom.
Well, you know that we're very fortunate here in BC because of a 283 page report that you can find at peaceandspace.org by Captain Jerry Flynn of the. Do you know Captain Flynn?
Yes.
Yeah, and he his report led to. He's had 26 years of experience in electronic warfare, and his report led to the banning in BC of mandatory smart meters.
You can't do that. You see, that's what our atmosphere is for, is to filter out these longer wavelengths, microwave band. You don't, and what they're doing now, just from the sun, because it's in this minimum right now, is now white. It's not yellow when I was a kid. And the radiation and UVBs that are coming off it right now are toxic. You can't be out in the sun longer than about 20 minutes without getting blistered right out of the gate. The sun's different. And it's now being noticed on farms in the Midwest with cow pies, and the amount of flies that are on it or in the pigsty. They're just, and the ants. That is the first to go with these long ultraviolets that are coming in, what we call the UVBs, longer wavelengths. Now there's, in all the alternative media, they're talking about these blue screens and how they damage our eyes, and, you know, floaters and that kind of thing. it's all about the color of money. And there is no concern about dosimetry, LD50 ratios, and what's happening next with, being exposed to these bandwidths. Dr. Beal, B-E-A-L, out of Florida, is a world authority on dosimetry of various bandwidths on electromagnetic exposure. And every organ's a little different, like your temporal lobes. How synthetic telepathy works is that microwave band goes right through the skull and starts to heat up the temporal lobe. And when it gets to a certain temperature, it starts to ring. Once it rings, if heterodyne a voice on that, and you can hear it in your head. That's exactly how it works. And that can't be healthy, in terms of what it's doing in electromagnetics to the release of neurotransmitters, other kinds of things. We're in uncharted territory here. And my concern is in a lot of these different areas, for convenience, someone doesn't want to charge their battery at the wall. Now they want to be able to do it on the fly, with a 5G tower radiating everywhere so that you can charge your battery while you're running. And that's why this epoch is the Tapezia ritual, trial by fire, with electronics and radiation. We're about to end this epoch shortly.
Well,
Sorry,
what do you think of the Deagle? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No.
Yeah. There are various. If you go to Deagle.com, which is a military kind of information website, they have they've changed their data, but the basic data there is you can go to one page. They have the U.S. population at 2016 at 324 million. Then you go down to the U.S. population at 2025 at 54 million. Now they've adjusted that in the last year, where the U.S. population at 2016 was 324 million, and at 2025 it was 100 million. So they've reduced the level of the depopulation that takes place in 9 years. But that is a massive die-off.
Yeah.
Do you?
That's why they call that movie
believe
There Will Be Blood. That's there is going to. Can you imagine being in New York City, 16 flights up in your apartment, and the grid's been down now 4 days, and you have to go to the toilet? What a mess that's going to be. And the looting. I was in Kailua when Fukushima happened, and just the fear, a little wave came in as their so-called tsunami, but all the shelves were empty in panic. And if you imagine East LA, shrimp on the Barbie, here we are, how that's going to play. There will be warlords, and you can see how Mexico is doing that right now with the various cartels. How you can watch, NCIS, where Gibbs shoots the father, the mother, the daughter comes into the United States to try to even scores. Mexico is a dangerous place to travel now, even with a lot of money. It used to be them and us. I mean, the have and have-nots. I didn't like Mexico because of the disparity. The middle class is gone. And I was down there in 2014 with my mentor, Dr. Stanley Krippner. Krippner's, by the way, my mentor. He's the one that groomed me for this moment. And Krippner took us down near Popo, and we watched the Clovis culture. We went down south of Popo, and they were excavating here and excavating over there and excavating there. And yet it was all one city. It was bigger than New York. They had space flight, and that culture crawled out of a cave. So how is it going to play? Well, it's probably going to be like the day after tomorrow, where there's going to be a very short, immense event where the temperature drops to minus 100 Fahrenheit. Ocean currents reboot, and then it starts to warm up again. The problem is your frost lines that go to 10 feet, everything will be dead. That means you won't have any mycorrhiza, you won't have any seed, you won't have any of this. Now, Canada's smart. They have seed repositories in every province. And that's something that nobody else has, including Switzerland. And they have seed banks, but not like the way the Canadians do it. And your timber is the bottom line. And that has always been your strong point, that and your Maple Leaf Dollar, letting them buy their citizenship. I have concern about how we're going to make this. And I believe that we're going to find that for several years, we won't probably be able to farm on the surface of the earth. I don't know what it'll be from radiation, ash from forest fires and whatever. But I was fortunate when I came out of grad school, my first job at Boeing, before I went to anesthesiology, I worked under Art Pilgrim in Lunar Base Alpha 1. I was in charge of the physicist in charge of light, and we had a platform that we pretended like we were in outer space, with deep space, with all the creepy radiation, no shielding. That's the primary problem with spaceflight and going to Mars, is that you can't do that by normal travel. The amount of gamma rays are so thick. The studies that have been done, even the rats won't make it halfway to Mars before they're dead. That's where your Stargate and other concepts came in for, curved space and being able to tunnel, event horizons, that kind of thing. But I'm watching how physics is changing and how the face of physics is now moving toward the concepts of imagination as being the sense of reality. And all these altered states that man has, paranoia on down, they all are actual tools in a toolbox. We used to talk about wounding. That's a nice term in psychology, where people and their reaction to something is from a place of wounding. And what I have discovered is that wounds are often blessings in that they distinguish me different than you. And with anger, for example, if you use that emotion in right action, you can clean the floor better than anybody. And so it's learning how to integrate what we consider limitations. That's where the blessing part comes in. The glass is half full, not half empty. That was a primary teaching with SEALs. So while I'm doom and gloom, I want to say there will be blood, and yet man will persist. He's a hard biter.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, what percentage risk, that is occurrence, do you assign this event? Is it a 100% event? Is it a 50%? There's a 50% chance that this event is going to occur.
100%. There's
it's
no
what?
Historically, you can do mappings with ice plugs. There it is. It's recycled. It's statistically predictable. The Mayan calendar was off just a couple of years. A few years here or there is the distance in space that things change because it's curved or whatever.
Yeah, but so what you're saying is that, say, today's August 13th, 2018, and what you're saying is that in the next is between now and 2020.
Yep, that's what the Aborigines are saying.
Are saying, and
okay,
is
that doesn't mean they're right, but that's what they're saying, and their history has been dead on.
And is this 100% event, or is it a maybe event?
You can't not have it happen. It has to happen, just like a day after tomorrow is absolutely going to have to happen. That's how the ocean currents reboot.
Yeah. Now, so
it may not last long, And it may not be the flood of Noah. In fact, it probably won't be a flood. It'll be something else. But, and it could be, I don't know, virus, pandemic.
Yeah.
That's what National Geographic thought when they did their movie.
Now we all know about the deep underground bases, the DUMBs. What an acronym, right? And
everywhere is underground. The whole Earth is forest. That's why Antarctica exists. The Goonies here on the West Coast, where I am. There's one tunnel in our system that goes from East Rogue River all the way down into the Trinity. 4.5 hours by bike, motorcycle, and as a single tunnel, whoom, right straight down. And many of these are old lava tubes and/or bedrock, which means they're solid. The book that you want to read for the best description on all of this would be "We Are the Earthquake Generation." That book is pretty accurate. And what military does is identify bunkers and communities. Communities are like the Doukhobor and the Mennonite up north of you. Those guys are dug in better and will have a much higher likelihood of survival than Vancouver downtown, for example. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're self-sufficient. They're in, like Chattanooga. I went to Chattanooga. I was hired to go in and set up a sustainable lifeboat concept in Chattanooga. It took me 7 workshops, and 3 weeks later, Chattanooga today as a city eats 40% of the food that's consumed in Chattanooga is grown right there in town. And that's their logo right here, right now. They had a 200-year-old farm in the center of town. We turned that into a community garden. We every single restaurant on the Chattanooga River have greenhouses now. At least 70% of your salad or materials are grown right there locally. Your avos might be brought in. They can grow them in greenhouses as well. But it's like that. The problem is the just-in-time delivery systems of 3 to 4 days before your shelves are bare. That concept is not going to work very much longer. And in any of our lifestyle ways of being. And we're seeing that now in LA. They call it gangsta urban farming. That's an interesting story. This beggar was in a medium strip, traffic going in all 4 directions, and he's begging. And all of a sudden he got this idea and brought some dirt in and started growing vegetables right there on that little plot that he was standing on. And the Los Angeles city approved him doing that because he was no longer homeless. And people now, instead of begging, he gives them fruit or vegetables right out of the garden right there as traffic is going in 4 directions. Anywhere in New Jersey, all your skyscrapers now on the top of the skyscraper have farming going on to feed the kitchen somewhere down in the building somewhere that feeds the building. It certainly isn't enough food to feed the entire group, but it is in the right direction and metaphor. And children, right out of the cage, are set for sandboxes. That's where Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young said, teach your children well. It's probably, even more than timber, our most valuable resource. And Cloud Atlas and the way they did the mentorship, using 3rd graders to teach 1st graders. We have a bus here in Oregon called the Caterpillar. It's a big, long bus. And it's got entomology in it, for the monarch butterfly. And goes to all the grade schools, and the kids for a day get to go through the bus and learn about entomology. And what I'm going to do is strip that out. That will be workbook 3 that hasn't been written now for the power tools. And it will be on how a 3rd grader runs a mobile traveling water testing laboratory, teaching 1st graders how to test for water. That's what we should be teaching our children today. And the last chapter in that book, that little monograph thing, is how the 1st grader then goes home and shows his parents how he tested for the cleanliness of water. pH, turbidity, whatever. That is our future.
Right. Now, my understanding, though, is that the elites that govern society have built underground bases for themselves and have adopted a strategy that the surface are killing fields for the Homo sapiens who they want to wipe out. Is that not correct?
Last man standing. Well, good luck with that. A lot of them have fled to Costa Rica. Let's see how that one works.
No. I meant they are underground.
Yeah. That's true. And there's many different things on the internet showing these things. There's no reason you're going to need 10 feet between you and the surface of the soil for approximately a minimum of 2 weeks. It's going to get cold real quick. I don't know which hemisphere yet, but it'll be just like in the movies, day after tomorrow. In fact, that's pretty much how it's going to play, because imagination is reality, and that's where we always got our sci-fi. Started with a replicator before we called it a 3D printer.
Right. Now, could you remind us, those of us who don't go to the movies and who may not recall, what's the plot line of the movie Day After Tomorrow?
Well, the father is a world authority and is watching the magma build in India, and the kid is going to school in New York when all of a sudden a flood comes in and floods New York, and he is locked down burning a Gutenberg Bible to try to stay warm. And the dad then goes out to try to rescue him, and at some point they find people surviving. Here we are. In the movie itself, it takes about 2 weeks. It's about a 2-week event. And that is approximately accurate on how it's going to play. Where in the hemisphere, I don't know. It will probably be up north, up over Toronto, in that area. That's where it is in the movies, over in England, where the fighter jet is flying and a helicopter, and all of a sudden the temperature is dropping so fast that the helicopter doesn't even function anymore. It crashes, and everybody's frozen before it hits the ground. It goes real fast. And hypothermia aside, the ocean currents, because of the salt in it, has to do this. It's a physics thing. And it won't last very long. We have history where the dinosaurs have been found with food in their mouths. It happens that quickly. There's no warning.
Now tell me, you are having classified all of your life as a genius, and in fact, at a very young age, were called upon and invented inventions that were taken out to outer space, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So why is it that there is virtual silence about this forthcoming event?
How did Tonto put it to the Lone Ranger? What do you mean we, white man? The military is dead on this. That's what we do. That's why Putin, I have a handler from Putin. I'm an asset for a lot of militaries, not just the U.S. government. And it was Putin. And by the way, I might remind you that Putin is the one Edgar Casey said it will be the bear that saves America. Putin, in all of his criminality, and he's a criminal, third richest man in the world, and yet he has done more for Mother Russia than any of their leaders in their world history. And that's the same with Trump. Trump might be a criminal and a buffoon, and he is, but he's also a nationalist. And that's why the controversy exists right now. He's trying to save America, not so much for himself. Can you imagine what we would have done if Clinton had been in?
Well, wait. I'm confused, because if this event is going to occur, it doesn't matter. I mean, what's the difference?
Have bunkers. That's what we do here, is we manage bunkers for the president. However, the ones here in Oregon run maritime law, which means captain and commander. I don't report to anybody above me.
Okay, but you have bunkers for the 324 million Americans?
No, but we're setting up sustainable lifeboats for those that want to try to get to an oasis. That's what I'm going to be doing up in with Unity Church. Unity Church would like to set up a series of networking. That's why they call me the postman. I'm that supercomputer in Corvallis, you know that.
Right. So what is a sustainable lifeboat?
A lifeboat with oars. It's self-sufficient or enough that it can barter with next door.
That has the 333. 3 minutes of air, three days of water, and 3 weeks of food. Is that the definition of what constitutes a sustainable lifeboat?
You need to figure out how you're going to breathe. That's going to be, if you're underwater, you got 3 minutes. If you're out of water, you got 3 days. I got stuck in the Bering Sea once and thought I was going to die. I was only at sea for 1 day, already drank my urine. I was down into stasis and turned blue when they found me. I was lucky. That is what we're about, is to recognize priorities.
But you're really a Johnny Appleseed, but a Johnny Appleseed of the post-event.
Well, you mean I'm going to throw the core back to the ground and blessings? Yeah.
No. You're going around planting the seed of the sustainable lifeboats, correct?
And each habitat. This is really important. I interviewed Bill Mollison when he first came out in permaculture, and the reason that fragmented and is now more charismatic, with Stepholder and was that Bill messed around with his students, which is a no-no. And so it fragmented. But his concepts were that if you're growing a garden, the likelihood of you using it is 100 times more efficient if it's less than 60 steps from your kitchen. These are principles that were set up in permaculture. And what I have discovered is that every habitat is different. There's a woman at the University of British Columbia in forestry that talks about the mycorrhiza in the soil. Mycorrhiza is kind of like a hierarchy of organisms, kind of like you find in your gut. In fact, that is Gaia. That's how Gaia talks. She says the mother tree, that's the oldest tree in the forest, will set a signal out through the mycorrhiza warning the forest of an impending forest fire or drought. And her concept is extremely valid. The mycorrhiza and the myceliums, the interface is latticing. You can see there's a hierarchy of resonant cavity oscillators, kind of like your gut. And when you start to move information from one subsystem up to the next level, from a virus up to a bacteria, what you have is biological amplification. And that was present even with the voice to skull concepts, where your certain parts of your organs, moving it from one subsystem to another, will amplify the signal. If that's a holographic model where you talk about resolution of information. And what we're trying to do is plant a seed to get a concept started in British Columbia, another one in Alberta. Right now, I have several in every state in the United States. Up in Sandpoint, Idaho, there is a 57-year-old Quaker retreat called Peaceable Kingdom on the Pack River. And down in Arapahoe, Colorado, is an old missile silo with 24 families in the silo running the garden on top. Pretty much what we're going to do is bring some of those gardens inside the bunker and have them be like what we call vertical aquaculture. That is, the model's now being used where you work with LEDs. There's an LED company over in Kelowna I'm talking about. They're going to have me up later. And what they do is they've discovered that broccoli requires a certain bandwidth of LED light for most efficient growing compared to cauliflower. And so they design these different LED systems, which are cool. You're not losing your power with the heat from a light bulb, and very efficient to run. And then as the water falls, going from one, terrace to the next, if you want to look at it like a terracing, the water heats up. The heating up of the water is then determining which plant goes there, because certain plants absorb the water differently.
So look, in 1973, this is what we were writing.
I could tell you.
No. In the spring, we were writing the draft, rather in the fall. We were in the spring and summer. We were writing the draft of the Age of Cataclysm, and this is what we were writing about preparing. And then it was published in 1974. It was in all the airport bookstores,
right?
And it was that. And so, why is it that humanity and the earth is in such a poor civil defense posture, and why is it that we're getting so cosmically sandbagged? That's what I can't figure out. What's behind the cosmic sandbagging? Is this like God's wisdom or the devil's malice? Tell me.
The correct answer is yes.
Oh God!
Well, no, I mean that's it's all of the above. People asleep at the wheel. The good news is, time is a duration of consciousness. It's not real, which means if I'm doing it, everybody is going to be doing it at some point, because it's archetypal, and that's the most important thing to remember. Just because I'm off the couch doing my chores right now does not mean you're about to get off the couch. Everybody's going to get off the couch at some point because they have to. And if they don't, well, then that's what we call evolution of the species. No, I'm just kidding.
I smell a planetary species set up for Homo sapiens. We've
been invaded. There's no question. Black goo. Let's talk about, that in the forest, black mold, and what it does. It's attacking White House right as we speak, and the Washington Monument, and all the rest of it. This black stuff into the white marble. And black goo is in everything. At Chernobyl, at Indian Point, at down in 3 Mile Island, and of course Fukushima thrives. Fukushima is a serious event. People have no idea just how bad that was. And when it went off, was that 2011? Yeah, 2011, when Fukushima went off, it changed everything. And it is a heralding of how our technologies are failing us, in that we're into greed, like what Gecko and Wall Street, greed is good. And Cyndi Lauper, it changes everything. Money changes everything. The problem is we didn't have a solution on radiation and nuclear waste. And now Hanford is leaking in the Columbia River. And we have a serious problem ahead of us. And it was supposedly supposed to be solved with controlled thermonuclear fusion, with thorium and some of the other things. It hasn't yet been developed. And so we've got a bunch of garbage, just like these big garbage lots that we have run by the mafia. All your sanitation landfills are huge. I mean, we're talking about mountains now, and that's all DuPont and his concept of plastic and overpackaging everything. You have more packaging on something than you do. You take a little bottle of syrup, and you still got plastic, you still got the glass, and you just got a little tiny bit of syrup. But what do you do with this afterwards? Make a flower pot out of it? I don't know. We're overpackaging everything, and that again is because you want to bring a strawberry in from another planet. so it doesn't rot in the refrigerator. I mean, it's creepy to see how strawberries never rot anymore. They never turn bad. They just stay the same hard sponge that they seem to be. It's not about nutrition anymore. It's kind of crazy. There's something to be said about growing your own food and pulling it out of the ground. The ability of empowering you, of knowing you've got your food covered, your water covered. You have no idea what that does to you as an individual, to know that you're covered on that level, that you don't need money, you don't need a savings account and a 401k, you don't need anything like that to survive. Entertainment's going to be another one. That's one of the categories. There's 7 categories, with heat and refrigeration. I remember how when I went to Africa and I saw how they make a refrigerator where they have a bowl inside another bowl filled with sand, and they fill the sand with water, and the evaporation drops the temperature just enough to stop bacterial action, limiting it, that kind of thing. That's how they do it in Africa. There's all kinds of things that you can do that your grandfather did that do not need to necessarily going back to old technologies. You can integrate these into new ones. Solar panels, turns out you can grow crystals just like you grow carrots. You can make your own solar panels for a group in your community. If you had 11 houses you wanted solar panels on it, it's cheaper to set up your own little limited growth pond, making your own solar panel, than bringing them in from somewhere else. Now that is a concept and way of being. And that's what I'm advocating. That's what I teach, how to do that. How you would grow crystals like you would a carrot. And then you cleave it and make a solar panel out of it. Because the solar panels are gonna at some point break down, and they're no longer efficient, and you have to replace them. And how are you going to do that when the company doesn't exist anymore? Well, we could call that an herbal pharmacy, because when the grid goes down, you're not going to have your heart medicine, blood thinner. I've lost my sound with you. How come I've lost my sound?
No.
Oh, there I go. I've got a
yeah. Sorry about that.
Well, no, I am animated, and when I'm animated, I touch things, and then they break. And
No. That was me on my mute. Now, this event, I have to say that I'm still holding it as a hypothesis. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's fair enough. And this event, how should one prepare one's personal life if one is currently living inside the normal geologic world, that is the world according to normal geology?
Yeah, according to GARP. Yeah, it will be your neighbor that saves your life, not your family member. It will be your neighbor that saves your life, as a metaphor.
Meaning,
and so, yeah, that's why you always had 3 people in a squad or more, because someone is always awake, watching out for the others while they sleep. It's a concept. It's a way of being, community. We call them tribes. That's what you're essentially practicing or experimenting with now, is tribal consciousness, where you have a commune or a communal thing. I grew up in Seattle with growing family, and so I understand and appreciate that idea. Marty West was in our commune. He taught anthropology. He grew up in Borneo and had studied with Bushmen. And so he walked to school as a full professor in bare feet, picking his food from the neighborhood in Wallingford before, and he had lunch, when he arrived to teach classes. And, but you have to be very careful, because he also poisoned us one time with morning glory seed. You know, by accident got into the salad and we're eating scopolamine and hydrothiamine, and you know. But to know your environment, to like Gurdjieff, eat your environment. You have been climatized. You're on the coast, so we're going to eat salmon and crab. That sounds lovely. The Fraser and salmon arm. The first reserve. I have friends that are Shuswap and Thompson that live up there for years and years and had a big medicine lodge down here on the Hoe. And that's a long time ago. And so I'm anxious, anticipating possibly seeing old friends I haven't seen in 30 years. Gary Gage, Judy Son, some of them mentioned some of them. You're going to like Deliso. She's coming up from Las Vegas. You'll find her amusing. And her background, running the Grand in Las Vegas. She's got some stories, I'm sure. So it'll be really fun to come up and spend some time and get to know you better. I see you like the Indian paintings behind you. Those are Salish, I think.
Well, these are from Haida Gwaii. And and they were made by one of our housemates. Of the who actually shows his paintings have been shown here at galleries on Granville Island.
I love coastal tribes still have medicine, and medicine is the songs and dances, it's an oral tradition like the Kabbalah used to be, Kubal, word of mouth, where they have the history of how this ocean got its salt, that kind of thing, the stories.
Right.
That's down. That's what makes identification of various Indian tribes, especially the coastal tribes, very rich in that regard. Most of them down here where I live in Oregon have been killed out because of gold, California gold rush, that kind of thing. The histories have been lost. The Indians are angry, they're mean and they want to do this and they're betting them for that. They do a lot of.
I think that Fred Trump came in and his whorehouses serviced the gold rush people.
Yeah, I think what we've got is 7 feathers and gambling. And so we might as well get them into drug addiction, growing controlled substances on reservations. What do you think? We can go up to Saskatoon and we grow the great scarlet poppy for codeine and green chop it off a reservation and ship it up to Saskatoon to put them in ampules. Turns out the Yurok have a coastal port down in Crescent City, which means they can bypass the government. We might as well get them involved in all of it. Gambling.
Oh.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, I know. You're using irony.
Yeah.
Irony as a teaching mechanism for any surveillant bot that doesn't understand. I'm sure that we're being looked at by AI surveillance bots, and they don't understand irony. That's the problem these days. Now, let me ask you this. No. Aspetta. Let me ask you this about the hypothetical. Now, what the percentage of hypothesis versus, let's say, 99.9 down to 50 down to 20. There are people that have appeared on this show within the last 10 days that have said, yes, we could have the event, and if the consciousness shifts, the event doesn't happen. That's been what the guests have said. Over to you. What do you think about that?
We called those kinds of things error coefficient, sigma. 1 sigma, 2 sigma, 3 sigma. 3 sigma is 99.99975% probability that the event's going to happen. In your Gaussian distribution, it's all, but I can prove all of it. The ocean currents are going to have to reboot. That's a given. There will be a day after tomorrow. How long it lasts, a minimum 2 weeks, a maximum of 2 years, probably somewhere around a month, most likely. Who knows? Just depends on how quickly the currents reboot, like the Gulf Stream. That's necessary for the ocean currents and the way they direct weather. We can try to modify and control some of that with geoengineering, but then we have all this barium and aluminum oxide getting into the soil that causes forest fires to burn differently. Then we have the Navy, for example, that actually deployed lithium on Reedsport 2 years ago to see if they could lock down a small city, you know, in unrest. How do you do that? You have an aircraft go over and deploy lithium, put everybody down in a zone. Who cares? Everybody was sick when I went in. It was unbelievable. Who does that? You have to realize it's an incredible amount of money. When you realize that it costs $10,000 an hour for a jet fuel just to go across the atmosphere, and you see all these different streaks and lines. The ones that do the West Coast here are coming out of Chilliwack. We've already vetted that. They come out of Chilliwack and they turn around down at Klamath Falls. That's the West Coast. The Midwest is even worse. I have no idea where they're coming out of. These would be those big aircraft you see in Chilliwack that have no markings. They're very large UN. It's a UN project. But $10,000 an hour, and how many hours of scratch are up in that atmosphere of yours right now today, even with the weather the way it is? And you realize it is and they're doing that even in Russia. And that's Putin trying to stop that stuff. I don't know the full extent of what's going to happen. I can tell you that the grid is going to collapse. That'll be some kid out of Pakistan going something out of Fridays. You know, look what I can do. Look what I can do. You know,
right. Yeah.
Create a collapse.
No, right. Could you explain what exactly are they trying to stop? I still don't have. Is this a celestial body flyby? Is this an Earth hitting a plasma field? What is the basic physical, geophysical, astronomical, geophysical driver of this event?
Binary coming through our solar system, creating
the binary star.
Yeah, like Nibiru.
Okay. Now,
and that, by the way,
no. Espera. I'm getting to the question. I spent a year of programming on an inner Earth chart. This is knowledge that is known in the inner Earth in Agartha and was brought by a Buddhist teacher to the surface, a Canadian, and published a book, Remember Zen. And we studied this chart, and the chart it's hidden in the esoteric for the surface world. It's hidden in the yin yang symbol. In other words, the 2 points in the yin yang symbol each represent one of the two dual suns, and the entire cycle is a 25,920 year cycle. So it takes about 12,500 years to do the half cycle. And when they're together, when they're maximally apart, it's the Kali Yuga. That's when things are really like dicey on Earth. And when they're together, paradoxically, it's the golden age, because that's when you have the maximum thing. Now, we went through this thing, and where things were maximally apart, let's say almost maximally apart, that's when Jesus came, when we had the bestowal of a paradise sun as sort of like, okay, this is like to keep it together, because it was like the two things were maximally apart. You were in the Kali Yuga, where you have 1 part virtue and 3 parts sin. That was what the hologram was dialed to in terms of like behavior and all that. And then, so now we've just entered exited the Kali Yuga into the Dwapara Yuga. So we're into a different holographic program cycle, which is 2 parts virtue and 2 parts sin. So it's a bit more on the behavioral ascendant. However, no, aspetta.
Yeah,
I haven't been, no, let me complete this meme. So, because this is a competing meme, it's a competing timeline, is what I'm going to lay down here.
I got it there.
Yeah. And so basically, what it says is that the flyby, we're a long way from the flyby because we just entered the Dwapara Yuga. We just exited the Kali Yuga when we were maximal away from the dual sun, and we are about 8,000. No, aspetta. We're about 8,000 years away from the flyby of the dual, according to. And this is according to inner Earth stuff. So this is. I'm just putting forth as a hypothesis, and this is a hypothesis. I don't know which is right. I really don't know which is right.
Let's try it this way. When I was studying, working with MRU, that's the paranormal studies I did for the military in the early 70s. Ostrander and Schroeder came out with a book called Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain.
Right.
At that time, not Russia, but Prague, Czechoslovakia, was at least 10 years ahead of us in technologies. And the military, we knew about aliens, but they were more worried about what the Russians were doing back then. And that's what I was in that charge rather than working at Broom Lake. Now, one of the technologies I got associated with was called cosmobiology. It's a technology that the primary one that you might be familiar with was Yanov, when he wrote about the lunar sex cycle of the woman. That when a woman is born, a biological clock is set in her body on when she's going to ovulate, predicated on the position of the sun, the moon, and the earth. And if she moves around to the different part of the earth, that biological clock changes. She ovulates at a different time. And it was a type of birth control. That was Yanov and his lunar sex cycle of the female. There was a second one that came out that I did, which had to do with Uranus. Now, the planet Uranus is so far away, there are no known laws that would affect the Earth or the sun in any way. It's so far away in terms of its mass. And yet, there was a 3 sigma error coefficient on when the planet Uranus, the Earth, and the sun were in a specific geometric alignment. And this was all came out of Czech physics that is still unparalleled and is based on old technology called cosmobiology. And what I did was I vetted first with a 360 computer, IBM, back in the 70s, doing geometric studies of when this event occurred and related it to earthquakes on the Earth. And the Department of Interior out of Menlo Park was the one that issued that grant for us. And basically, there was a 3 sigma. You remember that 99.99975% probability with Uranus, the Earth, and the sun. We do not understand yet what celestial movements are. Is the Earth flat or round? The correct answer is yes. For example, when you do physics, what you're doing is a model, and you start with assumed truths before you even have definitions, and then you go to axiom, postulates, and theorem. Now, it used to be that the shortest distance between 2 points was a straight line. However, today, we know that that's no longer true, that curved space and tunneling, event horizons in solid-state physics, and precursor waves in a lattice. So, with that said, the shortest distance between 2 points is no longer a straight line. You can, with specific mathematics, prove that the Earth's flat. It isn't flat. It's all of it. It is the way you choose to set your memes up in how you're going to look at the physics of how you're going to measure something, either in space-time, resolution of information, or some other system of measurement that you might use. Now, Kali Yuga and the Upanishads and the systems that were used back then dealt with such things as sound and its relationship to words. The Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation. If you look at Bibles, and I have, you can see that from one point of view, it is a type of science that deals with religion as opposed to science. In other words, science and religion are a closed system in an hourglass with only the moment, and it has limitations. And as such, is a closed system. That means your system is different than mine, and laws behave differently. And now we have something else going on in the way we choose to see what our environment is. It was, who was it that said, when you see the kingdom of the Father on earth, the apocalypse has already occurred. It is perpetual in its potential. That is a famous Jungian, I can't think of his name now, that said that, but he said that was a concept of what end of days might mean to individuals. And when you can see the kingdom of the Father on earth, now that's apocalypse. And so it differs with each of us and our way of choosing to see things. And I'm going to guess, as a scientist, I now have an understanding that there might be as many different religions as there are individuals on earth. And that the reason you join a church is for fellowship, to reinforce those values. And the values themselves, the belief systems, are arbitrary. If you were a staunch Christian and two aliens walked in the door, could you see them? I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't believed it. Our brain, the upper brain that we associate with the mind, is there to make all our beliefs true. It's a tool. Now, as such, I have a sweater that I will not wear in summer. Yet I really like that sweater. Let's say it's Christianity. And so I fold it up neat and I put it away for when it's appropriate. And I feel that Joseph Campbell, that's who said it. That was Joseph Campbell. When you see the kingdom of the Father on earth, the apocalypse has already occurred. It is in the eye of the beholder, based on belief systems, which are arbitrary because, and this is the most important point, imagination is reality. When the minister says, is this house white or gray? The correct answer is yes. It's all of it. And what we're doing is seeing a very limited part, and that has led me to another important discovery. There are some things not knowable at any century, like God. God cannot be known, can only be experienced from my definition points of view. And so it's beyond our comprehension. We can experience it, like apocalypse, but and the changing of times. Because time isn't real, why do you think you're right here at this very moment? Alfred? Because you're here to witness it. And that's a metaphor, if you will, in terms of what your relationship to self should be. Now, I don't have the answers, and I'm finding my answers change moment to moment. I mean, literally, they do, with feelings and, it's like a hologram constantly changing. I don't have the answers, but I know that the earth cannot continue like this. If nothing more, the earth is about to limit infection. How's that one for a metaphor?
That is a very you. I experienced you transmitting uh, a very powerful reality, and bringing certainly myself, and I hope the audience, into a shared reality and not just an intellectual argument.
Right, right. And it varies. And that's why I have watched a woman rip a car door off to save her daughter in a flaming automobile. I've seen that happen. But that's impossible. The bone in her body isn't as strong as steel. How can she do that? Yeah, that's the question. Say, as altered states where in these different states, the laws are different. You can do different things. Yeah, you want, yeah, okay, good. Someone got that. Well, I have a dinner party in half an hour, so.
Okay. Well, look,
no, we're good.
we'll wind this up.
Oh, I have so much fun with you.
Okay.
No, I have fun. You're provocative. You ask good questions, and I don't have answers. I'm along for the ride, like you are. I can guess and try to predict, but really, what we have is the moment. And when we have synchronicity, you know how I got 6 things in front of you, and you go, "Wow, that's really important." That place. That's how a future timeline talks to the moment. And if you are able to integrate that into the moment, changes your past. The cavitation ball is different. And that is being studied just like that at MIT right now by Mark Leclerc in cold fusion processes. A single drop of water, here we go, falls and hits a pool of water. A series of things happen. The drop goes poof, and it comes back up again. But it's no longer a drop of water. It's now a bubble that has captured the air or medium in which it's fallen in a cavitation process going into the out of it. And you can see that on a wave, and why the wave moves faster than the water itself does. When water touches anything, it has memory. And what that memory does is that it's the waves that go out when the drop hits the water and the waves go out. That's future. The waves that go in and they slap form a bubble of special exclusion zone water, H3O2. That's Jerry Pollack and his exclusion zone water, or easy water. It touches anything, it changes everything. That's why Rustum Roy and his work at Penn State in homeopathy, where you have a glass of water and you drop a single particle of something, into it, and they call that homeopathy. What happens is it changes the entire glass of water. The same thing happens with thought and the way psyche is brought into matter. And that's what I'm writing about now, and how to do that using my brain and the release of specific neurotransmitters in concert, like sounds, harmonies. And I'm not there yet, but I recognize that place. And that, in my opinion, is the ascension or next stage in the evolution of man's consciousness. And that's why this series, the ESP book, Power Tools, and the Non-Local Minds, are toward the evolution of consciousness. I'm trying to take physical tools that I developed for Navy SEALs to make them Superman, and now offer them to the individual for their own personal development. Journaling, honest journaling, just forming a dialogue with inner self, taking a diary every day is such a powerful tool. You immediately start to have answers. And as your wife, Jerry, might, acknowledge, it is always your first thought that's always the most correct. this brain here can get you killed. The logic and the possibilities of, I'm not going to get shot or I could get shot. The very fact that it's possible, you can count on it. That's how it works. Whereas if you're working from instinct, it doesn't matter. We talked about third wave generation, D-wave technology and AIs and how they can predict what you're going to do 28 minutes before you do. They're using them in law enforcement right now. The Mossad last year arrested 400 Palestinians on future crimes, just like in the movies. How can they do that? Well, there is a distinction between intent, what actually happens at the end of the day, and purpose, why you're here. Now, purpose, turns out, is a place artificial intelligence can't go. When you are in the slots 4x4, when you're doing the flow, you're in your purpose. That's where Aleister Crowley said, none shall say nay, when you're doing your true will. And by the way, hey, Ron, hey. I have a friend from Hawaii just walked in.
Good.
By the time I get back from Canada, he's going to be gone. So.
Okay, good. Well, look, is there anything that you had wanted to say on the show that you have not had the opportunity to bring up yet?
Everything's good, and we should do this way more often because I can talk on any topic you'd like. I would encourage those that if you would like more of May, that's what I'm doing up in Canada on the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th. I'm going to be doing 2 talks at night, open to the public, and then 2 8-hour intensive workshops. And one of them is to bring back partly where I'm actually going to teach a technique on how to change your perception of time using breath control and Tai Chi. And that's how I was able to take Navy SEALs and make their martial arts paranormal. The precision of it, just with breath control. It's interesting. There's so many things that men can do that we have ignored that are divine destiny, divine right. And we have ignored altered states, and yet each one was a gift from God to be able to do things that you can't do in a conscious waking state. That's what is so wonderful about the study of these altered states, the ontologies of these mystical states, where here your ability in guessing can increase 400 times over where you are right now. And over here, you can have the strength of 10 for a brief moment, like an ant does. These universes are all around us. And just in the moment you and I have been talking, I can't even begin to guess how many altered states just you or me have gone into in just this little brief moment. And each one of them is a gift.
That is amazing. And I urge everyone to go to richardallenmiller.com and experience even more altered states. Richard, thank you so much. And
Pleasure.
Until our next conversation.
Well, I'll see you in a couple days. Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, sure. And our next conversation here.
I would love that. Thank you.
Great.
Alfred.
Certainly. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir.